is Professor Confessions, true classroom stories. Today's episode is the Corvette story, so buckle up. I've taught communication at nearly all levels of education. Depending on the campus, depending on the time of day, depending on the topic, you get a range of different students. One semester I had these two students. They were friends. We'll call them James and Archie. They came to class together, they sat together, they did their group assignments together. They were a little rough around the edges. I had to settle them down once or twice, which is something I don't usually have to do for a college course. But overall, they were okay. This was a public speaking class, and the time of the semester came where it was time to give presentations. So Archie stands up and he gives his presentation. The topic was the do's or don'ts when you're locked up, prison etiquette. And I thought, okay, an odd topic, but interesting. When you give a presentation in my class, one of the criteria is you have to establish how you're a knowledgeable source of information. You have to state your credibility. And you do that by either stating that you have experience or research, or perhaps both with your presentation. Well, Archie's credibility statement was experience. He said, I spent a year locked up, and I learned that even inmates have a code of etiquette that they follow. So then he went over some of those aspects. I was a little surprised because he seemed so young, and I thought, did he mean jail or prison? And I asked Archie after class about that, and he says, no, I went to prison. And I said, how old are you, Archie? And he says, I'm 19. And I said, well, you went to prison pretty young, right at 18. He's like, yeah, I messed up. I said, okay, no problem. Good for you coming back to class and getting yourself situated, or back to school, getting yourself situated. He told me that James was a support system for him, that he was on probation, that he was required to attend classes faithfully, and James was already taking classes at the college and said, look, I'll take classes with you. I'll make sure you get to your classes. You know, good for them. Well, James wanted to give his presentation after Archie that day, and James stands up in the front of the room and he points at his buddy Archie and he says, me and Archie like to go up in the club every weekend. And I'm thinking, okay, well, where is this topic going? And James says, it may not look like it, and you may think that I'm exaggerating, but nearly every weekend that we go to the club, I get in a fight. And he gestures to himself and says, you can see that I'm a small guy. And when you're in the club and, you know, there's drinking going on, you know, people could be in a good mood, a bad mood, any type of mood, they'll fight with the small guy. And he said, for example, you can be on the dance floor and it's crowded and you will bump into people. Well, for me, when other guys bump into me, they'll push me harder or have a few choice words for me. And then I don't like that because I have a temper too, and it escalates. Then James went on to tell us a time where he went to the local nightclub with Archie and he ran into an old high school acquaintance. So he says, I started chatting her up. We had a couple drinks, we danced, and we were spending the evening together. And my friends took off and went to Denny's. And it was such a guy thing to do. They did it on purpose. He was aware of it. So as the evening's drawing to a close, he invites the girl to go eat with him. And he says, oh, I guess my friends took off. Can I go with you? As they're leaving, James explains, another guy that this girl knew sees her and starts talking to her, a friend. And he finds out they're going to eat and he invites himself to go with them. Well, James says that he didn't like that. And so he told the guy, you know, maybe some other time it's just going to be the two of us. And the other guy didn't like James telling him that. And so they had some choice words, pushed each other, ended up throwing hands and rolling on the ground. And he said the bouncers pulled us apart and told us to go home. And the girl took off. So he said in a sad voice, and then I had to walk to Denny's because my friends were already eating and they wouldn't pick me up. So James ended up saying, I was tired of these things happening. I couldn't take it anymore, so I joined Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And he says, even a small guy like me can defend himself against a larger opponent. Then he invites Archie up to the front of the room, and he has Archie demonstrate two different self-defense techniques. And then he invites the class to stand up and gather around. And then James lays on the floor and Archie gets on top of him. And I'm thinking, what the heck is going on here? Am I going to have to stop this speech? And James says from the floor, imagine another guy on top of you. And I'm thinking, no, I don't want to imagine that. And imagine they're trying to punch you. And so Archie demonstrates that. And James demonstrated, as he's continuing his presentation, how to protect yourself and block and actually use the other guy's momentum to move him to the ground and to come on top and to protect yourself and get the upper hand. These two guys, a little rough around the edges, but quite frankly, they surprised me. They gave some pretty good speeches. And, I was proud of them. So it's a public speaking class. There was one final presentation left to give, and these are major class grades. You need to do all the presentations in order to pass the class. It's a requirement. Well, the next class period, James doesn't show up. His buddy Archie showed up, but James didn't show up. I didn't really think anything of it. I thought, he showed up to every class, but fine, he missed a class, whatever. The next class, he doesn't show up. Archie's there, but James isn't there. So when I get down to the list and I call James and he's not there, I say to his buddy Archie, I said, where's James? And he says, oh, he's not coming. And I said, well, I hope he comes to the next class because he's got one class left and then we have speeches and he's got one speech left to give along with everybody else. And Archie says, he's not coming anymore, sir. He's on the run. And I'm thinking, okay, well, what's going on here with James? Did he choke somebody out at the club? Is there something more serious? What is he on the run from? I wasn't going to ask Archie in class, but after class I pulled him aside and I said, what's going on with James? And Archie says, James's dad got a new Corvette. And I'm thinking, okay, where is this story going? And then he said, James asked his father if he could borrow the Corvette. Of course, his father said no. What does James do? He waited for his dad to fall asleep, took the keys, and then took the Corvette out for the night. Who does he pick up to go with him as his ride or die buddy? He picked up Archie. And, if my dad had a Corvette and I was bold enough to do this, I would be very afraid to do anything that was going to leave, the slightest mark on the vehicle. I would just maybe rev the engine a little bit and be like, this is pretty fast. That's not these two guys. These two guys were on a different level. They had a different mentality. Archie told me they were racing anyone and everyone that would race them. They were doing burnouts in parking lots, taking turns fast. They were at red lights, and then when it turned green, they were going as fast as they could to see how quickly they can go from 0 to 60. Just pushing this vehicle to its limit. Well, Archie went on to explain that they had raced someone around 2 a.m., lost control, and crashed into a light pole. The car was inoperable. They had to get out of the car and they hoofed it. They ran to Archie's house, which was 15-20 minutes it took them. They ran/walked. I asked Archie on the side, I said, what happened to the guys you were racing? They didn't check to see if you're okay? No, they just kept going. I'm like, okay, I guess that's the way things are. Anyways, they get to Archie's house. Archie explains they get into Archie's car. They drive to James's house. James sneaks into his house, gets a bunch of clothes, and sneaks out and leaves with Archie. Come to find out, he's not on the run from the police. He's on the run from his dad. And I asked Archie, I said, what does that mean, on the run from his dad? Archie said, James's plan was to disappear for 6 months, maybe a year, until his dad's anger went away from crashing the Corvette. And then he says, then he'll come back and reunite with his family. And I said, okay, well, I can see that now, but what does that have to do with class? He can still come to class. And Archie was a, tough demeanor guy. He'd walk to class like this, like don't mess with me type of attitude. This was the first time I saw Archie flinch. In other words, I saw him with like this fear in his eyes, and he's like, "This isn't a secure location, sir. James's dad knows about all his courses. He will look for him here on the campuses." And he said he's not going to work and he's not coming to any of his classes because his dad will find him. And then he points to the parking lot. Archie gestures to the parking lot and says, he may even be waiting outside to confront you to see what you can tell him about his son and his whereabouts. Now I'm freaking out, and I remember leaving that day looking over my shoulder like, what the heck is going on here? Archie said that James's dad was a higher up in the military and that he scared him. And I'm thinking, is this guy like Liam Neeson from that movie Taken? Do you remember where he gets on the phone and he tells those kidnappers,
I will look for you. I will find you. And I will kill you.
And the other thing that flashed through my mind was the movie The Dark Knight. Remember when Batman is sitting in the interrogation room with the Joker and he just starts beating the hell out of him?
Where are they?
Killing is making a choice.
Where are they?
For information, and in his gruff voice, where are they? You know, I'm thinking, well, this guy could probably do one or both of those things to me. I was a little freaked out myself. And I got myself together and I told Archie, I said, look, I've got other classes. I got other class times for public speaking. James doesn't have to give his presentation in this particular class. He can go to one of my other classes and give his presentation. But he has to give his presentation in order to pass the class. Tell him. And Archie got a little put off and he was very adamant. He's like, no. He's not going to any of his classes. He has a paycheck at work he's not picking up. I'm not going to pick it up for him and get followed. He'd rather get fired from work, not pick up his paycheck, and fail all his classes than to face that scene with his father. Do you know what kind of scene that would be? And I said, okay. Well, maybe things will work out with them. And that was it. Archie finished the class and, no additional information on James. I never saw James again. So I don't know if James to this day is still on the run, if his father somehow found him and choked him out or something, or if he finally came home and reunited with his father. But wherever James is, I wish him well, and I hope that things have settled down with his father and him and they've been reunited and things are good to go. But the lesson here is simply this. You cannot ghost your consequences. You can't ghost your consequences. In communication, avoidance is a delay tactic, not a strategy. And the silence invites others to write your story. Don't let that happen to you. Whenever you are in a situation, talk early and own it. A hard 5-minute conversation beats a 6-month vanishing act every time. So, closure now is cheaper than cleanup later. Well, my dear students, now it's your turn. What's a moment you almost tried to ghost, but you faced it instead? Remember to keep it clean and anonymous. Drop your story in the comments. And hey, if you need to have that 5-minute convo with someone today, do it. This has been Professor Confessions. True classroom stories, real classrooms, real moments. See you in the next one.